allowed this poor black boy into my luxury car store? I asking you all a question. Get him out of here now! I said move! Let go me!
How the heck did you get in here? Security! Who the heck allowed this poor thing to walk into my luxury car store? The lady immediately asked as she arrogantly humiliated the black boy who was standing in front of her. When the black boy asked, "How much is all your luxury cars plus your entire store?" "I want to buy it now in cash." That was the moment that changed everything. Watch. Enjoy. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel, do it now. We post quality stories every day just for you. Let's go. The glass doors swung open with a force that made everyone in the showroom turn their heads. 3 men in dark suits walked in, briefcases in hand, faces expressionless. Behind them came another man, older, with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He carried a leather portfolio under his arm and scanned the room like he owned it. Because in about 5 minutes, he would. Melissa Grant stood near the customer service desk, coffee cup halfway to her lips, frozen. Her eyes darted from the lawyers to her manager, then to the dealership owner who had just emerged from his office, tie loosened, face pale. Staff meeting. Conference room. Now. The owner's voice cracked slightly. He wouldn't make eye contact with anyone. Melissa exchanged glances with her coworkers. Derek shrugged. Sandra looked nervous. They filed into the conference room, whispers bouncing off the walls. The lawyers remained in the showroom, silent sentinels among the gleaming vehicles. The owner cleared his throat. Once. Twice. Then he said the words that would change everything. As of this morning, this dealership has been sold. All assets, all inventory, all contracts. The new owner takes possession immediately. Silence. Someone dropped a pen. It clattered against the table like a gunshot. Sold? Melissa's voice was sharp, disbelieving. To who? The owner opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked toward the door. That's when Melissa saw him. Standing in the doorway, hands in the pockets of a tailored black suit, was the boy from yesterday. The one she'd had security escort out. The one she'd laughed at with Derek and Sandra. The one whose worn hoodie and scuffed sneakers she'd mocked loud enough for customers to hear. Except he wasn't wearing a hoodie now. And he wasn't a boy. He was a man, young but composed, with eyes that held no anger, no triumph. Just a quiet certainty that made Melissa's stomach drop like an elevator with cut cables. Their eyes met. She couldn't breathe. "Let me tell you how we got here," he said quietly. The story had started 3 days earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon when the autumn sun painted everything gold and the air smelled like possibility. Eli Carter stood outside Premier Luxury Motors, one of the most exclusive dealerships in the city, watching through the floor-to-ceiling windows as salespeople in crisp shirts moved between customers and cars that cost more than most people's houses. He'd been watching for 20 minutes, taking mental notes, observing patterns. Who approached which customers? How long conversations lasted? Which cars got the most attention? He had a small notebook in his pocket, but he didn't need to write anything down yet. His memory was excellent, trained by years of watching his father assess business opportunities with nothing but his eyes and his instinct. Eli was 21, though people often mistook him for younger. He had the kind of face that could look boyish or mature depending on the light. Today, in his faded Howard University hoodie and jeans with a small tear at the knee, he looked like a college student killing time between classes, which was exactly what he'd been a year ago before everything changed. He moved closer to the window, studying a midnight blue Porsche 911. Beautiful machine. His father would have loved it. Would have pointed out the custom rims, the upgraded exhaust, the little details that separated a good car from a great one. Inside the showroom, Melissa noticed him. She was in the middle of closing a deal with a middle-aged couple, but her attention snagged on the figure outside. She watched him circle toward the side lot where the highest-end inventory sat, the cars they didn't advertise prices for because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. "Excuse me one moment," she said to her customers, smile perfect, and made her way toward the back offices where Derek was finishing paperwork. "We've got a lurker," she said, nodding toward the windows. Derek glanced up. The kid in the hoodie? Been out there almost half an hour. Just watching. Taking pictures on his phone. Probably an Instagram thing.
Kids these days photograph everything. Or he's casing the place. Melissa crossed her arms. I've seen it before. They scope out the lot, figure out security patterns, come back at night. Derek laughed. This isn't a crime documentary, Mel. He's just a kid looking at cars he can't afford. We all did it at that age. We didn't do it while looking homeless. He doesn't look homeless. He looks like a college student. Same difference in a place like this. Melissa turned back toward her customers, but kept one eye on the window. I'll keep watching. If he's still there in 10 minutes, I'm going to have a conversation with him. Eli had moved to the side lot now, where a pearl-white Bentley Continental sat next to a matte black Mercedes G-Wagon and a silver Aston Martin DB11. He stood in front of the Bentley, not touching it, just observing. He noted the custom leather interior visible through the window. Noticed the slight gap in the door seal that suggested it had been opened and closed thousands of times despite its immaculate appearance. Floor model, he thought. Probably been here a while. He pulled out his phone and took a photo, not of the whole car, but of the VIN visible through the windshield. Then another of the window sticker. He was building a file, piece by piece. Can I help you? The voice came from behind him, sharp and cold, despite the polite words. Eli turned to find a woman in her early 30s, blonde hair pulled back, navy blazer, expression hovering somewhere between suspicion and annoyance. Just looking, Eli said evenly. Beautiful cars. This is private property. Melissa's smile didn't reach her eyes. The showroom is where customers browse. Out here is for serious buyers only. I see. And how do you determine who's serious? The question seemed to catch her off guard for a second. Well, serious buyers generally come inside. They speak with a sales associate. They don't hover outside taking pictures for Instagram. I wasn't taking pictures for Instagram. Right. TikTok then. YouTube. Whatever platform kids use these days. She glanced pointedly at his hoodie. Look, I'm sure these are nice cars to look at, but this isn't really the place for window shopping. There's a Honda dealership about 3 miles east that might be more in your range. Eli felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the same feeling he'd gotten countless times growing up when teachers assumed he was in the wrong classroom, when security followed him in stores, when people crossed the street to avoid passing him on the sidewalk. He'd learned to recognize it instantly, that particular blend of judgment and dismissal that people tried to disguise as helpfulness. I appreciate the suggestion, he said, voice still calm. But I'm interested in what you have here. Melissa's smile tightened. These vehicles start at 6 figures. The Bentley you're photographing is listed at $240,000. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just being realistic about price points. You don't know my price point. I can make an educated guess. Her eyes traveled from his shoes to his hoodie and back. And I think your time would be better spent somewhere else. There's really nothing here for you. A couple emerged from the showroom behind Melissa, well-dressed, laughing about something. They headed toward a red Ferrari in the front row. Melissa glanced at them, then back at Eli. If you're not going to come inside and speak with someone seriously about a purchase, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the property. We have actual customers to attend to. Eli held her gaze for a long moment. He could argue, could tell her exactly who he was and watch her face change. Could pull up his bank account on his phone and show her numbers that would make her stammer apologies. But his father had taught him something important. Never show your hand until you're ready to play it. Understood, he said quietly. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down. Melissa watched him, frowning. What are you writing? Just notes. For later. He tucked the notebook away and offered a polite nod. Have a good day, ma'am. He walked away, past the showroom windows, past the couple now sitting in the Ferrari taking selfies, past the Premier Luxury Motors sign that gleamed in the afternoon sun. He didn't look back, but he felt Melissa watching him go. Inside the showroom, Derek met her at the door. Everything okay? Fine. Just some kid trying to play pretend with cars he'll never afford. I sent him on his way. You sure that was necessary? He wasn't bothering anyone. Derek, in this business, You learn to read people fast. That kid was wasting time, probably hoping to get photos for social media clout. We don't need that kind of traffic here. This is a luxury dealership, not a photography studio. Sandra joined them, carrying an iPad with a customer profile loaded. Who was that outside? Nobody, Melissa said. Just someone who got lost on the way to the bus stop. They laughed. It was the kind of casual, dismissive laugh that people share when they think they're in on a joke together, when they think they're on the same side of an invisible line that separates people like them from people like him. Eli heard the laughter through the glass as he walked away. He didn't react. He just kept walking, pulled out his phone, and made a call. Marcus? Yeah, it's me. I need you to pull together the full portfolio on Premier Luxury Motors. Everything we have. Financial statements, ownership structure, inventory logs, outstanding debts. Yes, all of it. How fast can you get it to me? Perfect. I'll be at the office in 20 minutes. He ended the call and slipped the phone back into his pocket. The autumn sun was still golden, the air still full of possibility. But now the possibility had shape, had purpose, had a face that belonged to a woman who thought she could judge someone's worth by their clothes. The next morning, Eli returned. Same hoodie, same jeans, but this time he brought coffee from the shop next door. He stood in almost the same spot as yesterday, sipping slowly, watching the dealership wake up. Melissa arrived at 8:15, parking her white Lexus in the employee lot. She didn't notice him at first. He waited until 9:30, when the showroom filled with potential customers, when the energy was high and the staff was busy. Then he walked to the entrance and stepped inside. The showroom was exactly what he expected. Polished concrete floors, modern lighting, carefully curated music playing at a volume that suggested sophistication without distraction. The smell of leather and new car air fresheners mixed with expensive cologne. Everything designed to make people feel like they were entering a temple of wealth and status. Eli moved slowly between the cars, observing details. He noted the way the Lamborghini was positioned to catch the morning light. Saw how the McLaren's door was propped open to showcase the interior. Watched as a salesman named Derek, according to his name tag, guided a young couple toward a Range Rover, voice smooth as butter, promising them a feeling, not just a vehicle. Excuse me. Sir. Melissa's voice cut through the showroom ambiance like a car alarm. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Eli turned to face her. She walked toward him with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested she was about to handle a problem. Derek glanced over, concerned. Sandra, working with another customer near the financing desk, watched with raised eyebrows. I'm going to need you to leave. Melissa's voice was loud enough that everyone could hear. Right now. I'm just looking at the cars, Eli said calmly. No, you're trespassing. I asked you to leave yesterday, and here you are again. This is harassment. Harassment. Eli's voice remained level. I'm a potential customer in a car dealership. How is that harassment? You're not a customer. Customers come in, they speak with sales staff, they test drive vehicles, they make purchases. You're just wandering around taking photos and wasting everyone's time. The couple Derek had been helping looked uncomfortable. The woman whispered something to her partner. They started moving toward the exit. I haven't wasted anyone's time, Eli said. I haven't spoken to anyone. I'm just observing your inventory. Let me be very clear. Melissa stepped closer, voice dropping slightly, but still audible to anyone paying attention, which was everyone. This dealership caters to a specific clientele, people with the means to actually purchase these vehicles. You don't fit that profile. Yesterday, you were lurking outside. Today, you're inside disrupting our business. I don't know what your angle is. Maybe you're trying to start some kind of social media drama. Maybe you think you can sue us for discrimination. But I'm telling you right now, you need to leave before I call the police. The police, Eli repeated. For what? I haven't broken any laws. Trespassing. Harassment. Take your pick. She turned to Derek. Call security. Derek hesitated. Mel, maybe we should just call security, Derek. Now, the showroom had gone completely silent, except for the background music, some jazz piece that now felt absurdly out of place. Other customers were leaving. The couple Derek had been helping was already out the door. An older gentleman who'd been examining a Mercedes sedan was heading for the exit, shaking his head. Two security guards appeared from the back offices, both large men in black uniforms with radios on their belts. They approached cautiously, unsure of the situation. This individual has been asked to leave the property twice and has refused. Melissa said, voice official now, like she was filing a police report. He's disrupting business and making our actual customers uncomfortable. Please escort him out and make sure he understands he's not welcome back. One of the guards, an older black man with gray in his beard, looked at Eli with something like sympathy. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us. Eli held the guard's gaze for a moment, saw the apology there, the understanding. The guard knew exactly what this was. They both did. But the guard had a job to do, and Eli wasn't going to make it harder for him. No problem, Eli said quietly. He turned to Melissa. I'll leave, but I want to make sure I understand the situation correctly. You're refusing to allow me to shop here because you've decided I can't afford to shop here. Is that accurate? I'm refusing to allow you to disrupt my business any further. There's a difference. Is there? Eli held her gaze. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you made a decision about me the moment you saw me yesterday. You decided who I was, what I could afford, what I deserved, all based on how I looked. And now, you're having me removed to protect your other customers from someone you've decided doesn't belong here. Melissa's face flushed slightly. I'm protecting my business from someone who's clearly here to cause problems. The only problem I've caused is existing in a space you think belongs to people who don't look like me. Eli's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes had changed. A hardness, a clarity. But you're right about one thing. I'll leave, and you won't see me again. At least, not the way you expect. He walked toward the exit, the security guards flanking him, but not touching him, maintaining a respectful distance despite Melissa's performance. As they reached the doors, Eli turned back one last time. Have a good day, Melissa. He said her name deliberately, having read it from her name tag. Let her know he saw her as clearly as she thought she saw him. Then he was outside, the autumn air cool on his face, the sun still golden, the world still full of possibility. The security guard who'd spoken to him, the older black man, followed him a few steps past the door. I'm sorry about that, the guard said quietly. That was uncalled for. Not your fault. Eli offered a small smile. You were just doing your job. Still, she had no right to speak to you that way. To treat you like that. The guard glanced back at the showroom. Some people think this world belongs to them, and people like you and me are just passing through, needing permission. Maybe, Eli said. But permission is a funny thing. Sometimes the people who think they give it are really the ones who need it. They just don't know it yet. The guard studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. You take care of yourself, young man. You too, sir. What's your name? Robert. Robert Hayes. Nice to meet you, Robert. I'm Eli Carter. They shook hands. I have a feeling we'll see each other again soon. Robert smiled, confused but somehow hopeful. I hope so. And I hope next time it's under better circumstances. It will be, Eli said. I promise you that. He walked away, past the luxury cars, past the building that housed people who decided he didn't belong, past the sign that gleamed with false promise. He pulled out his phone and made another call. Marcus, move up the timeline. I want everything ready by tomorrow morning. The full acquisition, all contracts, all paperwork. Yes, tomorrow. I don't care what it takes. Just get it done. And Marcus, make sure Thomas knows I want him there in person. This one's important. Inside the showroom, Melissa stood near the customer service desk, arms crossed, watching through the windows as Eli disappeared down the street. Derek approached carefully. That seemed a little intense, don't you think? It was necessary. We can't have people like that hanging around scaring off real customers. People like what, exactly? Derek's voice had an edge to it now. People who are clearly not here to buy anything. People who are wasting our time and energy. This is a business, Derek, not a charity. He wasn't asking for charity. He was looking at cars in a car dealership. Oh, don't be naive. You saw the way he was dressed, the way he was acting. He was either trying to make some kind of statement or he was planning something. Either way, we don't need that here. Sandra joined them, having finished with her customer who'd left without buying anything, probably because of the scene. That was pretty harsh, Mel. Did you really have to call security? Would you rather I waited until he vandalized something? Until he made a scene that ended up on the internet? Melissa shook her head. I've been in this business for 8 years. I know how to read people. That kid was trouble. Trust me, we're better off without him. If you say so, Sandra said, but she didn't sound convinced. She glanced at Derek, who shrugged. Later that afternoon, after the dealership had returned to normal, after Melissa had successfully closed 2 deals and felt vindicated in her assessment of who belonged and who didn't, the owner called a brief staff meeting. He looked tired, distracted. He didn't make eye contact with anyone. Just want to let everyone know there are some potential changes coming to the business. Nothing to worry about, just normal market fluctuations. But there might be some meetings with investors over the next few days. If you see unfamiliar people in the building, that's why. Just carry on as normal. What kind of changes? Melissa asked. Nothing that will affect day-to-day operations. Just financial restructuring. The economy's been tough on luxury sales. We're exploring options to keep the business strong. That's all I can say right now. After the meeting, Melissa pulled Sandra aside. Did that sound weird to you? A little. But he's been stressed for months. Ever since the expansion fell through. I'm sure it's fine. Yeah, probably fine. But there was something in the owner's voice, something in the way he wouldn't meet anyone's eyes, that planted a small seed of unease in Melissa's mind. She pushed it aside. She had work to do, deals to close, a quota to meet. No time for worry about things outside her control. That evening, Eli sat in his office on the 23rd floor of a building downtown, windows overlooking the city as lights began to flicker on against the darkening sky. His office was modest by CEO standards, deliberately so. He'd learned from his father that real power didn't need to announce itself with mahogany desks and leather chairs. Real power was quiet, certain, and patient. Marcus, his chief financial officer, sat across from him with a laptop open, running through final numbers. We can have everything ready by tomorrow morning like you asked, but I have to tell you, this is moving fast even for us. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. It's not cheap. The dealership's struggling, but they're not desperate enough to go cheap. And the inventory alone is worth millions. We're looking at close to 45 million total to acquire everything outright. I know the numbers, Marcus. Okay. Just making sure you're not making this decision emotionally. Because I saw the way you looked when you came back from there yesterday and today. This isn't like the other acquisitions. This one feels personal. Eli leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. My father used to tell me a story. When he was my age, he went to buy his first real car, not a beater, but something nice that said he'd made it. He walked into a dealership in his work clothes, paint on his hands from the construction site. The salesman took one look at him and laughed. Actually laughed. Told him to try the used car lot down the street where people like him belonged. Marcus listened quietly. My father left. Didn't argue, didn't make a scene. He left and he worked harder. 10 years later, he owned a logistics company worth $200 million. And you know what he did? What? He went back to that dealership, bought 3 cars in cash, and never went back again. He could have bought the whole place, could have gotten that salesman fired, could have made it personal. But he didn't. He just proved the man wrong and moved on. Eli paused. I always thought that was the right move. The dignified move. Prove them wrong by succeeding, not by revenge. But lately I've been wondering if that's enough. If letting people get away with that kind of disrespect, that kind of judgment, if letting them continue treating others the way they treated him, the way they treated me, if that's really the high road, or if it's just another form of acceptance. So this is about more than business. Everything's about more than business, Marcus. Every decision we make says something about who we are and what world we want to live in. That woman at the dealership, Melissa, she didn't see me yesterday or today. She saw her own prejudices. She saw assumptions and stereotypes. And she felt so comfortable in those assumptions that she was willing to humiliate me publicly, twice, and face no consequences for it. And you're going to teach her a lesson. I'm going to teach her reality. There's a difference. Eli stood, walking to the window. The city stretched out below him. Millions of lights, millions of lives, millions of stories just like his and his father's. She thinks the world works a certain way. She thinks she can look at someone and know their value, know their worth, know their place. I'm going to show her she's wrong. Not out of anger, but out of necessity. Because people like her don't change until they have to. Until reality forces them to see what they've been refusing to see. Marcus closed his laptop. Okay. I'll have everything ready. Thomas is already on board. He'll be there tomorrow morning with the lawyers. The owner's desperate enough that he'll take our offer. You'll have your dealership. Thank you, Marcus. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't let this turn you into someone you're not. Your father taught you to be better than revenge, and he was right about that. Whatever you do tomorrow, make sure you can still look at yourself in the mirror and see the man he raised. Eli turned from the window, meeting his friend's eyes. I promise. This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. There's a difference. I hope you're right. Me too. After Marcus left, Eli stayed in his office for another hour, looking out at the city, thinking about his father, about the stories of casual cruelty and quiet dignity, about all the times someone had looked at them and seen less than they were. His father had handled it with grace, with patience, with the long view that said success was the best response. But his father had also died at 62, stress-related heart attack, working until the very end to prove himself to a world that had decided he didn't belong long before he ever made his first dollar. And Eli wondered, not for the first time, if all that patience, all that dignity, all that grace had cost his father years he should have had. Maybe there was a middle ground. Maybe you could demand respect without becoming the thing you opposed. Maybe you could hold people accountable without seeking revenge. Maybe teaching someone a hard lesson could still be an act of hope, a belief that they could change, that the world could change, if only someone forced the issue. He hoped that's what tomorrow would be. A lesson, not revenge. Accountability, not cruelty. A moment where someone's comfortable assumptions crashed against reality and came away changed. He hoped. But hope was a fragile thing when you'd been hurt as many times as he had. Tomorrow would tell. The next morning arrived with clouds that threatened rain, but never delivered, leaving the city in a strange gray light that made everything look like it was holding its breath. Eli dressed carefully, not in the clothes he'd worn to the dealership, but in one of his father's suits, tailored to fit him, charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe. His father's watch on his wrist, his father's cufflinks at his sleeves, a reminder of why he was doing this, of what it meant to carry someone's legacy forward. At 9 o'clock, 3 cars pulled into the parking lot of Premier Luxury Motors. 2 black SUVs and a silver sedan. The men who emerged wore suits that cost more than some of the cars in the showroom. They carried briefcases and portfolios, moved with the kind of coordinated purpose that suggested this wasn't their first acquisition. Thomas, Eli's corporate attorney and his father's oldest friend, led the way. He was a tall man in his 60s with the kind of presence that made people stand up straighter when he entered a room. Behind him came Marcus and 2 junior lawyers, plus an accountant whose job was to verify every number, every contract, every detail. They entered the showroom together, and the change in atmosphere was immediate. Conversations stopped. Salespeople looked up from their computers. Melissa, working with a customer near the Range Rovers, glanced over and frowned. The dealership owner, emerged from his office, face pale but composed. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming. My office is this way." They disappeared into the back, and the showroom erupted in whispers. Derek moved next to Sandra at the coffee station. "What do you think that's about?" "Has to be the financial stuff he mentioned yesterday. Maybe they're investors. Or buyers. God, can you imagine? New ownership. Let's not panic. Could be anything." Melissa joined them, customer momentarily forgotten. "Did you see how many lawyers just walked in here? That's not investors. That's an acquisition team." "How do you know?" Sandra asked. "I dated a corporate attorney for 2 years. I know what an acquisition team looks like." Melissa's voice had an edge of worry now. "If they're here to buy the place, that means changes. New management, new policies, possibly new staff. You think we should be worried?" Derek asked. "I think we should prepare for anything." In the owner's office, papers were being signed, numbers were being verified, accounts were being transferred. The dealership owner, Richard Chen, sat at his desk with the wariness of a man who'd fought a battle and lost. He'd built this business over 15 years, survived 2 recessions, competed with online sales and changing markets. But the latest expansion had failed, debt had piled up, and the offers he'd been getting from investors weren't enough to keep him afloat. Then 2 days ago, out of nowhere, a new offer had come in. Full price, all cash, total acquisition including inventory. It was more than he'd hoped for, more than he deserved given the circumstances. He'd asked questions, of course. Who was buying? Why so fast? What were their plans? The answers had been vague but professional. A private investment group based downtown, interested in expanding their portfolio into luxury retail, wanted to move quickly to take advantage of market conditions. Everything legitimate, everything by the book. He'd accepted. What choice did he have? Now, as the final papers were signed and notarized, as the bank transfers were confirmed and the keys were literally handed over, Richard felt the full weight of what he was losing. This wasn't just a business. It was his legacy, his pride, his proof that he could succeed in a country that hadn't always made it easy for someone like him. "It's done," Thomas said, closing his portfolio. "As of this moment, Premier Luxury Motors is under new ownership. All assets, all inventory, all contracts transfer immediately. Your staff will be informed this morning." Richard nodded. "What happens to them?" "My employees, I mean. Will they be kept on? That's up to the new owner. But I can tell you he has no interest in destroying what you built. He respects what you've accomplished here. Richard looked up. "I thought this was an investment group." "It is. But there's a primary owner. And he asked me to tell you that he bears you no ill will. He understands that sometimes circumstances force difficult decisions. But he also wants you to understand that this is a new beginning for this dealership. New leadership, new standards, new expectations." There was something in Thomas's voice that made Richard uneasy. Not threat, exactly, but promise. The promise that things were going to change in ways he couldn't predict. "Does he want to meet me?" Richard asked. "He'll be here shortly." He wanted to address the staff first. Address them about what? Thomas smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "About the future, Mr. Chen. About what this dealership stands for and who it serves. About making sure that everyone who walks through those doors is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or where they come from." Richard felt his stomach tighten. Did something happen? Is this about a customer complaint? Let's just say the new owner had a very educational experience here recently. One that convinced him this business needed new direction. Before Richard could ask more questions, his phone buzzed. His secretary's voice came through, nervous and confused. "Mr. Chen, you asked me to let you know when the new owner arrived. He's here. He's in the parking lot." Richard stood, suddenly needing to see this person, this mysterious buyer who'd appeared out of nowhere to take his life's work. He moved to the window that overlooked the employee parking lot. A black Tesla had just pulled in. The driver's door opened, and Richard's breath caught as he saw who stepped out. Young. Black. Wearing a suit that probably cost $5,000, but with a face Richard recognized from somewhere, though he couldn't place it. The young man paused next to his car, looking up at the building with an expression that was calm, measured, and somehow final, like he was about to close a chapter in a book. "Who is he?" Richard asked, though something in his gut was starting to put pieces together. "His name is Eli Carter. Does that ring any bells?" Richard shook his head, but even as he did, a memory surfaced. Not a name, but a story. His security guard, Robert, mentioning something yesterday about a young man who'd been escorted out, treated poorly by one of the salespeople. Robert had been angry about it, said it was wrong, said the kid had been respectful and hadn't deserved that treatment. "Oh God, he was here," Richard said quietly. "A customer. Or he tried to be." 2 days in a row, Thomas confirmed. Both times he was judged, dismissed, and ultimately removed from the property by your staff. Both times because someone looked at him and decided he didn't belong. Who? But Richard already knew. He closed his eyes. Melissa. Miss Grant, yes. She made quite an impression on Mr. Carter. Enough that he decided this dealership needed new ownership. Specifically, his ownership. Jesus Christ. Richard sank into his chair. He bought my business out of spite. No, Mr. Chen. He bought it out of principle. There's a difference. He bought it because he believes that places like this should serve everyone, not just the people your staff deems worthy. He bought it because he can, because he has the resources and the will, and because he wants to make sure what happened to him doesn't happen to anyone else. Richard was quiet for a long moment. What's going to happen to Melissa? That's up to Mr. Carter. But I imagine it will be educational for everyone involved. Downstairs in the showroom, Eli had entered through the main doors. He moved with the same calm confidence he'd had in the office the night before, but now it was armored in a suit that announced success, in posture that commanded attention, in a presence that made people stop and look twice. Melissa was the first to see him. She was back with her customer, finalizing numbers on an iPad, when something made her glance toward the entrance. She saw the young man in the expensive suit, and her brain processed him as a serious customer, someone worth approaching, someone who belonged. Then she recognized the face. The iPad slipped from her hands, clattering on the floor. Her customer looked at her, concerned. "Are you okay?" Melissa couldn't speak. She watched as Richard emerged from his office, face ashen, followed by the lawyers who'd arrived earlier. Watched as they approached the young man, as they shook hands, as one of them handed him something that looked like keys. No, this wasn't happening. Derek appeared at her side, following her gaze. His face went white. Is that the guy from yesterday?" Sandra joined them, and the three of them stood frozen as Richard raised his voice to address the entire showroom. "Can I have everyone's attention, please? Staff, customers, everyone. I need just a moment of your time." The room quieted. About 15 people were scattered throughout the showroom, salespeople, customers, administrative staff, mechanics from the service department who'd wandered in to see what was happening. All eyes turned to Richard. As of this morning, this dealership has been sold. All assets, all inventory, all contracts have been transferred to new ownership. I want to thank all of you for your years of service and dedication. This has been my life's work, and it's not easy to let it go. His voice cracked slightly. But I believe this change will be for the better. The new owner has assured me that he plans to maintain the quality and reputation we've built here, while also making some important changes to how we operate. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Melissa felt her knees go weak. "I'd like to introduce you to the new owner of Premier Luxury Motors. His name is Eli Carter." Eli stepped forward, and Melissa watched as every assumption she'd made about him shattered like glass. This wasn't some college kid playing pretend. This wasn't someone who'd wandered in off the street. This was someone with power, with resources, with the kind of quiet authority that came from actually earning it, not just performing it. "Thank you, Mr. Chen," Eli said, his voice carrying easily across the showroom without being loud. "I appreciate the trust you've placed in me, and I want to assure everyone here that this transition will be as smooth as possible." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the room, landing on each person for just a moment. When his gaze reached Melissa, she felt her stomach drop. There was no anger there, no triumph, just a steady assessment that somehow felt worse than hatred. "I want to talk about why I bought this dealership," Eli continued. "Not the business reasons, though those are sound. Not the financial opportunity, though that exists. But the real reason. The human reason." The room was completely silent now. "2 days ago, I came to this dealership as a potential customer. I was interested in your inventory, I had the means to make a purchase, and I conducted myself respectfully. But I was judged based on my appearance. I was dismissed, mocked, and ultimately removed from the property by security. Not because of anything I did, but because of who someone decided I was based on how I looked." Melissa felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She wanted to disappear, to sink into the floor, to be anywhere but here. "This wasn't just disrespectful," Eli said. "It was bad business. This dealership lost a potential customer, lost other customers who witnessed the incident, and revealed a fundamental problem with its culture and values. So I decided to acquire this business, not out of revenge, but out of a belief that it could be better, that it should be better." He moved forward into the showroom, walking slowly among the cars, and people instinctively moved to give him space. "My father built a logistics company from nothing. He started with one truck and a dream, and he grew it into a $200 million enterprise. He taught me that success isn't about proving people wrong, it's about building something meaningful. But he also taught me that sometimes, when you have resources and opportunity, you have a responsibility to change things that are broken." Eli stopped in front of the Bentley he'd been photographing 2 days ago. He ran his hand along the hood gently. "This is a beautiful car. $240,000, right? I remember the price, because it was mentioned to me as proof that I didn't belong here. But here's what nobody told me. This car has been on your lot for 14 months. I know because I looked up the records. 14 months, and nobody's bought it. Do you know why? Silence. Because you've been selling to the same narrow demographic for so long that you've forgotten how big the market actually is. There are people in this city with money who never walk through these doors because they've heard stories. They know people who've been treated the way I was treated. So they go somewhere else. Somewhere they're welcomed. Somewhere they're respected." He turned back to face the assembled crowd. "As of today, that changes. This dealership will serve everyone. And I mean everyone. If someone walks through those doors with genuine interest, they will be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their age, their race, their appearance, or any other factor that has nothing to do with their ability or intention to purchase a vehicle. Is that clear?" Nods around the room. Some people looked relieved. Others looked uncomfortable. "Good. Now, I need to address something specific. Miss Melissa Grant, could you step forward, please?" Melissa felt like she was walking to her own execution. Her legs barely carried her forward. She stopped a few feet from Eli, unable to meet his eyes. "Miss Grant, you were the primary person who interacted with me during my visits here. You made assumptions about me. You dismissed me. You mocked me. And you had me removed from the property. Twice. Do you remember these incidents?" "Yes." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Louder, please. Everyone should hear this." "Yes. I remember. And looking back now, do you think your treatment of me was appropriate?" Melissa's throat was tight. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she was just doing her job, protecting the dealership, following her instincts. But the words wouldn't come because she knew, had known even as it was happening, that something about it was wrong. "No," she said finally. "It wasn't appropriate." "Why not?" "Because I made assumptions. About you. Based on..." She couldn't finish. Based on my appearance. Based on my race. Based on your prejudices about what a person with money looks like. Eli's voice wasn't cruel, but it was unflinching. You looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong in your world. And you felt so comfortable in that assumption that you were willing to humiliate me publicly. Not once, but twice. Tears were starting to form in Melissa's eyes. I'm sorry. I'm sure you are. Now, but were you sorry yesterday? Were you sorry when you were laughing about me with your co-workers? Were you sorry when you told security I was trespassing? She couldn't answer. Here's what's going to happen, Eli said. I'm not going to fire you, Miss Grant. I could, and many people would say I should. But I think there's more value in you staying and learning from this experience than in you leaving and never facing what you did. Melissa looked up, shocked. You're going to be reassigned. You'll be working in our customer service department for the next 6 months, handling complaints and feedback. You'll hear from every customer who feels they weren't treated fairly. You'll process every incident report. You'll be responsible for making sure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else. And at the end of 6 months, we'll evaluate whether you've learned anything worth keeping you on permanently. Thank you. I won't let you down. Don't thank me. This isn't a favor. This is accountability. Use it wisely. He turned to address the rest of the staff. Let me be very clear about the culture I expect here. This dealership will be a place where every person who walks through that door is given the same respect, the same attention, the same opportunity. I don't care if they're wearing a 3-piece suit or a hoodie. I don't care if they're 18 or 80. I don't care about anything except whether they're here in good faith with genuine interest. If you can't operate with that standard, then you won't be working here. Is that understood? A chorus of agreement. Good. Now, Mr. Chen has agreed to stay on for the next month to help with the transition. I'll be bringing in new management, implementing new training programs, and making some changes to our inventory and marketing. We're going to expand our reach in this community and serve customers who've been overlooked by this industry for too long. He paused, and something in his expression softened slightly. I want to say one more thing. My father used to tell me that money doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are. I bought this dealership because I could, but also because I believed it was the right thing to do. Not to punish anyone, but to prove a point. That dignity matters. That respect matters. That how we treat people when we think they have no power over us says everything about our character. He looked directly at Melissa again. You had power over me 2 days ago. You used it to hurt me, to diminish me, to send a message that I didn't belong. Today, I have power over you. I could use it the same way. I could fire you, humiliate you, make sure everyone knows what you did. But I'm choosing not to because I want to believe people can change. I want to believe that this experience will teach you something valuable about judgment, about prejudice, about the cost of assumptions. His voice dropped, became almost gentle. I hope I'm right about that, Miss Grant. I really do. The silence that followed was profound. Melissa stood there, tears streaming down her face now, unable to speak, unable to do anything but nod. Eli turned back to Richard. Mr. Chen, thank you for building something worth acquiring. I hope you'll see this as a new chapter, not an ending. Richard nodded, something like relief and regret mixed on his face. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I hope you'll do right by this place. I intend to. The meeting dissolved slowly. People returned to their stations, their customers, their work. But everything felt different now. The air had changed. The rules had changed. The comfortable assumptions that had governed this place for years had been shattered in the space of 15 minutes. Melissa made her way to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and cried. Not just from embarrassment, though that was part of it. Not just from fear for her job, though that was real too. But from the sudden, crushing awareness of what she'd done, of who she'd been, of the casual cruelty she'd inflicted on someone who'd done nothing to deserve it. She'd thought she was protecting the dealership. She'd thought she was being professional, practical, smart. But she'd really just been afraid. Afraid that if someone like Eli could walk in and be treated like he belonged, then maybe the world wasn't structured the way she'd always believed. Maybe the advantages she'd taken for granted weren't actually earned. Maybe the hierarchy she'd accepted as natural was really just prejudice dressed up as propriety. It hurt to see that. It hurt worse to know that everyone else had seen it too. Outside, Derek found Sandra at the coffee station, both of them processing what had just happened. Did we just witness someone buy an entire dealership to prove a point? Derek asked quietly. I think we witnessed someone buy a dealership to change a system. Sandra corrected. There's a difference. Is there? It felt pretty personal. It was personal. But that doesn't mean it was wrong. Sandra poured herself coffee with shaking hands. I watched what happened yesterday. I saw how Melissa treated him. I didn't say anything. I should have, but I didn't. So maybe I deserved to be standing there feeling like an accomplice. We all saw it, Derek admitted. We all knew it was wrong. But it's easy to let things slide when you're not the one being hurt. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? We let things slide because it's easier than confronting them. And then someone like Eli Carter walks in and forces us to confront everything at once. They were quiet for a moment. Do you think he'll really keep her on? Derek asked. I don't know, but I think that's the most interesting part. He could have destroyed her. He had every right to. But he chose to give her a chance to learn instead. That takes more strength than revenge. Or it's a slower form of revenge. Sandra shook her head. I don't think so. I think he meant what he said. He wants to believe people can change. The question is whether Melissa actually will. Eli spent the rest of the morning in meetings with staff, reviewing operations, examining inventory, and beginning to implement changes. He moved through the dealership with Thomas and Marcus beside him, asking questions, taking notes, treating everyone with the same courtesy, regardless of their position. Robert, the security guard who'd escorted Eli out the day before, approached him hesitantly around noon. Mr. Carter, I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about yesterday. I was just doing my job, but I knew it was wrong. I should have said something. Eli shook his hand warmly. You did exactly what you should have done, Robert. You were professional, respectful, and kind even in an uncomfortable situation. That's exactly the kind of person I want working here. So I still have a job?
You absolutely have a job. In fact, I'd like to talk to you about potentially moving into a supervisory role. We're going to need people with your judgment and character in leadership positions. Robert's eyes widened. Sir, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about it. We'll talk more next week. After Robert walked away, visibly moved, Marcus leaned over to Eli. You're really serious about this, aren't you? The whole culture change thing. Of course I am. Why buy the place if I'm not going to make it better? Most people would just fire everyone who was involved and start fresh. Most people think change comes from removal. I think it comes from transformation. Give people a chance to be better and most of them will surprise you. And the ones who don't? Then they remove themselves. But at least we'll know we tried. They walked toward the lot where the highest-end inventory sat. The same cars Eli had been photographing 2 days ago, when Melissa had first confronted him. So what are you going to do with all these cars? Marcus asked. $45 million in inventory is a lot to just let sit here. Eli smiled. I'm going to buy them? What? All of them. Every car on this lot. I'm going to purchase them from my own dealership. Marcus stared at him. That's completely unnecessary. You already own them. The acquisition included the inventory. True. But it's symbolic. I want to be the customer that Melissa thought would never walk through these doors. I want to make the largest single purchase in this dealership's history. And then, I'm going to donate most of these vehicles to organizations that need them. Donate luxury cars. Not all luxury. We'll sell some of these and use the proceeds to buy practical vehicles for families in need, for job training programs, for community organizations. But yeah, some luxury cars too. To scholarship programs, to youth mentorship organizations, to places that can raffle them off to fund important work. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then laughed. Your father would be proud. I hope so. He always said money was a tool, not a trophy. Time to use it like one. They spent another hour going through details before Eli finally took a break. He stood in the showroom, looking around at the space that had rejected him just days ago. It looked different now. Not the physical space, but the feeling of it. Like something heavy had been lifted, like fresh air was finally circulating through rooms that had been closed too long. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. Heard you made a big purchase. Your father would have some thoughts about that. Love you, baby. He smiled, typed back. I know exactly what he'd say. Miss you both. Talk soon. As the afternoon wore on, word spread through the automotive community about the acquisition. Other dealerships heard the story, or versions of it. Social media picked up on it when a customer who'd been present posted about the morning's events. The narrative shifted and evolved as these things do, some versions painting Eli as a hero, others as vindictive, most somewhere in between. But in the dealership itself, something real was happening. Staff members were talking to each other differently. Customers were being approached with more care, more attention, more respect. The change wasn't complete, wasn't perfect, but it had begun. Melissa spent her first afternoon in customer service reviewing complaints from the past year. There were more than she expected. Comments about feeling judged, about being dismissed, about sensing that they weren't welcome. Not all from people of color, but enough to show a pattern. Enough to make her realize this wasn't just about her, wasn't just about one incident. It was about a culture that had been allowed to develop over years. Around 3 o'clock, Eli found her in the customer service office. How are you holding up? He asked. She looked up, eyes still red. Honestly, not great. But I'm reading these complaints and I'm seeing things I should have seen a long time ago. That's a start. Mr. Carter, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about this all day, and I need to say it. Okay, I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. Not just because you bought this place, and I'm afraid for my job, but because I hurt you. Because I judged you unfairly and treated you with disrespect that you didn't deserve. I've been telling myself all day that I was just doing my job, protecting the business. But that's not true. The truth is, I made assumptions based on prejudices I didn't even realize I had. And I'm ashamed of that. Eli pulled up a chair, sat down across from her. Can I ask you something? And I want you to be honest. Of course. Why did you assume I couldn't afford to shop here? What was it specifically that made you judge me that way? Melissa was quiet for a long moment. This was the question she'd been avoiding all day. The one that forced her to confront the truth she didn't want to admit. Your skin color, she said finally, voice barely above a whisper. Your age. Your clothes. I looked at you, and I saw someone who didn't fit the profile of our typical customer. And instead of questioning that profile, instead of challenging my own assumptions, I just accepted them as fact. I treated you like you were the problem when really I was the problem. Thank you for being honest. Does that change anything? Does it make you reconsider keeping me on? No. Because at least now you're seeing the truth. That's the first step. The question is what you do with that awareness. I want to change. I want to be better. I don't know if that matters to you, but it's true. It matters. But change is hard. You're going to have moments where old habits try to come back, where you catch yourself making assumptions. The key is catching them, questioning them, and choosing differently. I understand. Eli stood to leave, then paused at the door. My father had a saying. He said the measure of a person isn't in their worst moment, it's in what they do after that moment. You had a worse moment, Miss Grant. Several of them, actually. But you're still here, still trying. That counts for something. After he left, Melissa sat for a long time staring at the computer screen full of complaints. Each one represented a person who'd felt what she'd made Eli feel. A person who'd walked in hopeful and left diminished. She'd been part of creating that experience for people,
and she hadn't even noticed. But she noticed now. And that would have to be enough to start with. The sun was setting by the time Eli finished his work for the day. He stood in the parking lot, looking back at the building that was now his, at the cars that gleamed in the fading light, at the sign that read Premier Luxury Motors with his company's name now underneath it. Marcus joined him, carrying the last of the paperwork. Long day, Marcus observed. Good day, though. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Marcus looked at the building. You know, when you told me you wanted to buy this place, I thought you were being impulsive. Emotional. But watching you today, the way you handled everything, I get it now. This wasn't about revenge or ego. This was about doing something meaningful with resources and opportunity. That's all any of us should be doing. Most people don't, though. Most people would have just walked away or gotten that woman fired or made a big public spectacle about discrimination. You bought the whole place and turned it into a teaching moment. Because I don't want to just punish bad behavior. I want to prevent it. I want to create spaces where it can't thrive. That takes more than firing people. It takes changing systems. They walk toward their cars. Your father really did raise you right, Marcus said. He tried. I hope I'm doing him justice. I think you are. In fact, I think you might be taking what he taught you and building something even bigger. He showed you how to succeed in a world that didn't want you to. You're showing people how to change that world so others don't have to fight the same battles. Eli was quiet for a moment, feeling the weight of that responsibility, the hope and burden of it. We'll see. This is just one dealership in one city. The world's a big place. Sure. But every change starts somewhere. Might as well start here. They said their goodbyes and Eli climbed into his Tesla. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he saw Robert locking up the showroom, saw the lights dimming inside, saw the cars settling into their spots for the night. Tomorrow he'd come back and continue the work. Tomorrow there would be more challenges, more resistance, more opportunities to either give up or push forward. But tonight, he let himself feel satisfied. Not triumphant, not victorious, but satisfied that he'd used his resources for something meaningful. That he'd taken his pain and transformed it into purpose. That he'd given people, including Melissa, a chance to be better than their worst moments. His phone rang as he drove. His mother. Hey, Mom. Don't hey, Mom me. What is this I'm hearing about you buying a car dealership? Marcus's wife called me, all excited, saying you made some big statement about respect and dignity. What happened? Eli smiled. It's a long story. I have time. Talk to me, baby. So he did. He told her about the hoodie and the assumptions. About Melissa's dismissal and mockery. About being escorted out twice. About making the decision to buy the whole place. About the meeting that morning and the look on everyone's faces when they realized who he was. His mother was quiet when he finished. Your father would have handled it differently, she said finally. I know. He would have just proved them wrong and moved on. Maybe. Or maybe if he'd had the resources you have, he would have done exactly what you did. He always said the world needed changing. He just wasn't in a position to change it himself. But you are. And you're doing it. I'm proud of you, Eli. His throat tightened. Thanks, Mom. Just promise me you're not going to become one of those people who uses power to hurt people. Even people who hurt you first. I promise. That's not who you and Dad raised me to be. Good. Now tell me about these cars you supposedly bought. Please tell me you're not actually keeping 40 luxury vehicles for yourself. He laughed. No, Mom. I'm donating most of them. But I might keep the Bentley. Dad would have loved it. He would have. He always did like the nice things, even when we couldn't afford them. Said it was important to appreciate quality. They talked for another 20 minutes, as Eli drove through the city. Past buildings lighting up against the darkening sky. Past people heading home from work. Past all the ordinary moments that made up extraordinary lives. When they hung up, he felt grounded again. Connected to the reason he'd done all of this. Not for revenge. Not for ego. But because his father had taught him that success meant nothing if you didn't use it to make the world a little better, a little fairer, a little more just. The next morning, Eli returned to the dealership with a plan. He gathered the staff again, but this time the energy was different. People seemed more awake, more present, more willing to engage. "I want to talk about our new direction," he said. "Starting today, we're implementing a community outreach program. Once a month, we're going to host an open house specifically designed for first-time car buyers, people who might feel intimidated by luxury dealerships, people who need education about financing and options. No pressure, no judgment, just information and respect." He saw nodding heads, interest sparking. "We're also partnering with 3 local organizations that serve underprivileged communities. We'll be providing vehicles for their job training programs, their family services, their youth initiatives. Some through donation, some through heavily subsidized sales." More nods. Even Melissa, sitting in the back taking notes for her customer service reports, looked engaged. "And finally, I'm instituting a new training program for all staff. Not about sales techniques or closing deals. About recognizing bias, about treating every customer with dignity, about understanding that our assumptions are often wrong and always limiting. It will be mandatory for everyone, including management, including me." After the meeting, several staff members approached him with ideas, with enthusiasm, with stories about customers they'd misjudged or opportunities they'd missed because of assumptions. The culture was shifting faster than he'd expected. Derek caught him during a break. "Mr. Carter, I wanted to apologize. I was there when Melissa confronted you. I didn't say anything. I should have. You're saying something now. That counts. I've been thinking about how many times I've let things slide because it was easier than speaking up. How many customers I've prejudged based on appearance. I want to do better. Then do better. Starting today. That's all any of us can ask of ourselves." Over the following weeks, the dealership transformed. Sales actually increased as word spread about the new ownership and approach. Customers who'd never felt welcome before started coming in. Families, young people, people of color who'd been avoiding luxury dealerships their whole lives suddenly found a place that treated them like valued clients instead of suspicious outsiders. Melissa worked her 6 months in customer service, and somewhere along the way, something fundamental shifted in her. She started recognizing patterns in the complaints, started seeing how systemic the problems had been, started understanding that her behavior hadn't been an isolated incident but part of a larger culture of exclusion. She attended the bias training sessions with genuine openness instead of defensiveness. She asked questions, shared her own experiences of being judged as a woman in a male-dominated field, began to make connections between different forms of prejudice. She wasn't perfect, still caught herself making assumptions sometimes, but she caught them now instead of acting on them automatically. When her 6 months ended, Eli called her into his office. "You've completed your reassignment," he said. "Customer service tells me you've been excellent at the work. Thorough, empathetic, proactive about identifying systemic issues. The question is what you want to do next." "I'd like to stay," Melissa said. "Not in sales, though. I think my experience over these months has shown me I'm better suited to customer relations and training. I'd like to help implement the bias recognition programs, help train new staff, help make sure what happened with you never happens to anyone else." Eli studied her for a moment. "Why?" "Because I was that person. I was the problem. And if I can change, if I can learn to see my own prejudices and challenge them, then I can help others do the same. I can't undo what I did to you, but I can make sure it has meaning. I can make sure something good came from it." That's a mature answer. It's a true answer. I'm not going to pretend I'm some enlightened person now. I still have work to do. But I'm willing to do that work, publicly, as part of making this place better. Eli nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll create a position for you. Director of Customer Relations and Equity Training. You'll work with HR to develop programs. You'll handle sensitive customer complaints. And you'll be responsible for making sure every person in this organization understands that respect isn't optional. It's essential." Melissa's eyes widened. "Mr. Carter, I thank you. I won't let you down. Don't thank me yet. This position means you'll be held to a higher standard than anyone else here. You'll be the face of our commitment to change. Any slip, any return to old behaviors, and you're done." "Understood." "Understood." 6 months after the acquisition, Eli hosted the dealership's first community open house. Over 300 people attended, families who'd never dreamed of walking into a luxury dealership, young people curious about the automotive industry, community leaders interested in the partnership programs. There was food, music, educational sessions about car buying, No pressure sales, just welcome. Eli watched from the side as Melissa ran a session on understanding your options, a judgment-free guide to car buying. She spoke about her own journey, about the assumptions she'd made, about learning to see every customer as valuable regardless of appearance. People listened, asked questions, shared their own stories of feeling unwelcome in places that should have served them. Robert, now the director of security and community relations, stood beside Eli. Never thought I'd see something like this at a luxury dealership, Robert said. Maybe that's been the problem. We accept what exists instead of imagining what could exist. Your father would be real proud, Mr. Carter. I hope so. But more than that, I hope he'd be proud that we're not stopping here. This is just the beginning. And it was. The model Eli had created at Premier Luxury Motors started attracting attention from other business owners, other industries, people who saw that it was possible to be profitable while also being principled. Some dismissed it as a publicity stunt, but the numbers didn't lie. The dealership was thriving, not despite its new approach, but because of it. Eli received calls from other young entrepreneurs, other people of color who'd faced similar discrimination, asking how they could do what he'd done. He started sharing the model, the training programs, the community partnerships, started building a network of businesses committed to the idea that respect and profit weren't enemies, they were partners. One evening, almost a year after the acquisition, Eli sat in his father's old office downtown, the one he'd inherited along with the business. On the wall hung a photo of his father standing in front of his first truck, young and hopeful and determined. Eli stood next to it with his own photo, standing in front of Premier Luxury Motors on opening day of their first community event. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Carter, this is David Chen, Richard's son. My father asked me to reach out. He's been following what you've done with the dealership, and he wanted me to tell you he thinks you've honored what he built while making it better than he ever could have. He also wanted me to tell you he's sorry he didn't see what was happening on his watch. He should have done better. Thank you for doing what he couldn't. Eli stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, tell your father thank you. And tell him it's never too late to build something better. We're all learning. He set the phone down and looked back at his father's photo. Did I do right, Dad? He asked the empty room. Was this what you meant when you said money was a tool? The answer came not in words, but in the feeling that had been growing in him over the year. The satisfaction of knowing that the dealership now served people who'd been turned away before. The knowledge that Melissa and others like her had been given chances to grow instead of just being punished. The understanding that change, real change, didn't come from destruction, but from transformation. His father had taught him to succeed in an unjust world. Eli was teaching others to change that world so success was possible for everyone. Different approaches, same goal, same love underlying it all. He hoped that was enough. He thought it probably was. As the city lights began to sparkle in the darkness outside his window, Eli Carter, son of a man who'd been laughed at in a dealership for daring to dream big, owner of that same dealership, now transformed into something better, felt a peace settle over him. Not the peace of victory, but the peace of purpose. The work wasn't done. It would never be done, really. There would always be another Melissa, another assumption, another barrier to break down. But tonight, he could rest knowing he'd done something meaningful with the resources and opportunities he'd been given. He'd taken his hurt and turned it into hope, his anger into action, his pain into purpose. And in doing so, he'd honored not just his father's memory, but the memory of everyone who'd ever been judged, dismissed, and told they didn't belong. The boy they'd mocked had become the man who changed everything. And he wasn't done yet. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the assumptions we all make and the power we have to change systems instead of just navigating them, then share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button, drop a comment about a time you witnessed or experienced judgment based on appearance, and subscribe so you don't miss stories that challenge us to be better than our prejudices. Because the truth is, we all have a choice. We can be like Melissa was, judging people by surfaces and missing the depth beneath. Or we can be like Eli, taking our pain and transforming it into positive change. We can accept the world as it is, or we can build the world as it should be. The question is, which will you choose? Thanks for watching, and remember, never judge someone by their hoodie. You might be looking at the person who'll own the whole damn building. Now go out there and treat people with the dignity they deserve. Every single one of them. Because you never know who's watching, who's learning, who's taking notes on what kind of person you are when you think it doesn't matter. It always matters. Tell us exactly where you are watching from, Texas, New York, Alaska, Jamaica, or anywhere at all. Like and subscribe to our channel. Thanks again and watch out for the next one.